My stepmother kept threatening to divorce my dad because he refused to split our inheritance to her children. She tried one last time until my father finally agreed to divorce her. My dad's name is Trey, and he has been with my stepmother Donna for 20 years and married to her for 17. When they got together, he was doing well. Six-figure job, a big house, and a habit of paying for things before anybody had to ask. Within the first 2 years, he paid off her car, cleared every dollar of her debt, and moved her and her children into his home. His own 3 kids, me and my brother Malachi and my sister Siobhan, were already grown by then. 2 of her 3 lived with them, and my dad covered all of it without once making anybody feel like they owed him. I want that on the record before anything else, because none of what came later was about him being cheap. 3 years ago, my uncle Paxton, my dad's only brother, got sick and did not get better. Before he died, he told my dad plainly that the money he was leaving behind was meant for his 3 biological nieces and nephew, which is me, Malachi, and Siobhan, the only ones he had. He said it to us too. He wrote it down and signed it and left a copy with his attorney, which is a detail that mattered later more than any of us understood at the time. It was not a mystery what he wanted. My dad agreed to it, and that should have ended it. Then Donna found out, and it turned into a war. She said all 6 of us were theirs equally, and that my dad's money, including Paxton's money, should be split 6 ways instead of 3. I have tried to be fair about this. If she felt that way about everything she owned, I could at least follow the logic. But it only ran one direction. Her one real asset is her wedding ring, and that ring is already promised to somebody on her side of the family. The house, the car, and their joint accounts, more than $500,000, are already set to go to her. She was already receiving nearly everything, and on top of that, she wanted 1/3 of what a dying man left to his own blood. When my dad tried to explain what Paxton wanted, Donna had an answer for every piece of it. "We are a family," she said. "You cannot pick and choose which kids count." My dad said it was not him picking. It was his brother's dying wish. She said, "Your brother is not here, and I am. I am your wife." Then she reached for the thing that ended every conversation. She said, "If this is how you see our family, then maybe we should not be married at all." The first time she said it, my dad went pale and dropped the subject, and that taught her exactly how to win. Every time the estate came up after that, the divorce threat came out with it. She packed a bag one weekend and stayed gone for 3 days and let him sweat. Another time she moved into the spare room and slept there for a week, so he had to walk past that closed door every morning and think about losing her. It worked every single time. She even called me to say my siblings and I were tearing the family apart over money, while she sat in a house she already stood to inherit. For more than a year, the whole thing sat frozen, with Donna certain she had won by refusing to lose. I tried. I sat in on conversations between her and my dad, and tried to keep the temperature down, and every one of them ended the same way, with her wounded and hinting at divorce. I even talked to Renee, her oldest, who told me straight out that none of her mother's kids expected anything from my dad, because they were basically grown when the families joined. Renee said as much to Donna directly. It changed nothing. Donna did not want fair. She wanted all of it. What she never counted on was the morning my dad stopped being afraid of the door she kept pointing at. The estate came up again, and Donna reached for her line. "Then maybe we should just get divorced." And my dad looked at her and said, "Okay, if that is what you want, let's talk about how that works." She stopped. She said, "What?" He said, "You keep saying it, so let's look at it. In a divorce, you leave with what you came in with and your share, and that is a great deal less than what you get by staying married to me. The number is smaller that way, not bigger." For the first time in a year, Donna did not want a divorce. She went quiet, and then she said she had not meant it like that she was only upset, that of course she was not leaving. When she pushed the fairness angle one more time, my dad asked her the question nobody had said out loud. He asked whether she would be splitting her ring 6 ways too, among all the children, since they were all supposedly equally theirs. She said that was different, that the ring was special, that it had always been meant for her side. He told her that was his point exactly. Donna stayed, of course. She stayed right where the $500,000 was, which told my family everything we had wondered about for years. But she did not stop being who she is. For about 3 months, everything was calm. No threats, no guilt trips, no tearful phone calls. I spoke to my dad 2 or 3 times a week, and he sounded better than he had in years. He told me Donna had been sweet lately, that she made his favorite pot roast, that she was planning a weekend away for the 2 of them at a cabin, that she was affectionate again in a way she had not been in years. I wanted so badly to be happy for him, and part of me was. But there was a small, quiet voice in the back of my head saying this felt too neat and too perfectly timed, and I pushed it down because I did not want to be the daughter who could not let her father her be happy. I called Malachi and told him things seemed calm. He said, "Good, maybe she finally got the message." Siobhan said about the same thing. We agreed to let it ride. A few weeks later, my dad had a cookout, and when I got there, Donna pulled me into a real hug, held on a second longer than I expected, and said, "I know things got ugly. I just want us to be okay." I felt something loosen in my chest. I said, "I want that too." Nobody mentioned money or Paxton for the rest of the afternoon, and I drove home lighter than I had felt in a year. I was wrong about all of it. 2 weeks after the cookout, my phone rang around 8 at night. It was my dad, and his voice was tight in the way it gets when he is holding something in and trying to find a door for it. He said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." I said, "Okay." He paused too long. Then he said, "Would you and your brother and sister be willing to compromise on the inheritance? Not equal, but a smaller share for Donna's kids. Just something so she feels like they were included." 3 months earlier, this man had looked Donna in the face and told her exactly how a divorce would play out, and now he sounded like somebody had been taking the air out of him one breath at a time. I said, "Dad, what changed?" He let out a long breath and told me. Donna had been bringing it up again, but not the old way. She was not yelling or packing bags. She waited until they were alone at night, and she would go quiet and start crying softly. She would say she felt like a stranger in her own family. She would say that after 17 years of being his wife and raising her children under his roof, she still was not part of things where it counted. She would say, "Your kids will always have you. Mine have nobody looking out for them." Then she would lean into him and say nothing else. She did it every few nights. Not every night, because every night would have been visible. Just often enough to keep the wound open, so that every time he started to feel settled about his decision, she could crack it back open. I could hear in his voice that it was working. He was not angry. He was tired. I sat on the edge of my bed and felt 3 months of hope drain out of me like water through a crack. The dinners, the cabin trip, the hug at the cookout, none of it was real. She was building him up so the guilt would cut deeper when she took him back down. She had not changed. She had adjusted her aim. I said, "Dad, she just swapped the weapon. Yelling stopped working, so now she cries. If you give in on this, she will find the next thing and do it again." He did not say much. I told him not to agree to anything, not to sign anything, and not to promise anything until he heard from all three of us. I hung up and sat in the dark for a while, and what I felt was not panic. It was that cold, clear feeling you get when fog lifts and you can finally see exactly where you are standing. That weekend, I drove 2 hours out to Malachi's place. We sat at his dining table with coffee, and I told him the plan. All three of us. Same room, same day, telling our dad face to face that Paxton's money stays in 3 parts. He agreed before I finished. Then he set his cup down and his face changed, and he said, "Did you know Donna called me last week?" I stared at him. He said she had called out of nowhere, casual, asking about his job, keeping it light, and then she shifted. She told him she understood how he felt and was not trying to fight anyone. And then she said, "Your sister is the one pushing your dad on this. If it was just you and Siobhan, I think we could work something out." My fingers went tight around the mug. She was telling my own brother that I was the obstacle. Malachi said, "I know it is not true," but she sounded real. If I had not been paying attention this whole time, I might have believed her. I pulled out my phone right there and called Siobhan on speaker. I said, "Did Donna call you recently?" There was a pause. Siobhan said, "About a week and a half ago." "Why?" I said, "What did she tell you?" Siobhan said Donna had opened the same way, friendly and warm, and then said she was only trying to find a way forward that worked for everyone. Then she said, "Malachi already told me he is fine with splitting things. It is really just your sister holding this up." Malachi leaned toward the phone and said, "I never said that. I never said anything close to that." Siobhan said, "I did not think so," but she said it like it was a fact. My hands were shaking, and not from fear. Donna had called each of us separately and told each of us a different version of the same lie. Malachi was told I was the holdout. Siobhan was told Malachi had already folded. In both versions, I was the villain, and in both versions, the person on the phone was made to feel like the last one still fighting. Then I asked Malachi whether our dad had said anything about us changing our minds. His jaw tightened. He said, "A few weeks ago he told me he had heard one of us was already open to a compromise. He did not say who. She had been feeding it to him too. So while she cried at night about being alone in the family, he was sitting there believing his own children had started to drift. She was pulling the floor out from under him one private conversation at a time, and it only worked because none of those conversations ever happened in the same room. That was the whole design. said she did not need to win the argument. She needed to make sure we never had the argument together. We picked Saturday. We pulled up around 10 in the morning and walked up the driveway shoulder to shoulder. Malachi knocked, and the lock turned and Donna opened the door. Her eyes went from me to Malachi to Siobhan, and I watched her face do two things in half a second. First surprise, real surprise. Then it tightened, chin up, the way it always goes when she is preparing to defend herself. She said, "Oh, all three of you." She did not step aside right away. Then she turned her head and called for my dad in a flat voice, the way you announce a package you did not order. We moved into the living room and my dad came around the corner, and the first thing I noticed was how worn down he looked. He stopped when he saw the three of us standing together and let out a small breath and said, "I had a feeling this was coming." I said, "Dad, we need to talk about Uncle Paxton's money." And Donna crossed the room and placed herself between us and him and said, "Anything about this family involves me. I am his wife." Malachi said, calm and flat, "This is about our uncle's wish. It was his money." Donna did not look at him. She turned to my dad and said, "Are you going to let your children talk to me like I do not exist?" That is her move. Turn any boundary into an attack on her. So the person who said it has to stop and defend themselves instead of finishing the sentence. My dad asked her for a few minutes alone with us. She walked to the couch, sat down, crossed her arms, pressed her back into the cushion and said, "I am not leaving my own house." So I said it in front of her. I looked at my dad, and I did not look at her once. I said, "Donna has been calling each of us separately. She told Malachi I was the problem, and that if I backed off, everyone else could work something out. She told Siobhan that Malachi had already agreed to split it, and that I was the only holdup. She told you that one of us was ready to compromise. Every one of those was said to a different person. Every one of them contradicts the others, and not one of them is true." The room went quiet enough that I could hear the clock over the television. My dad turned and looked at her and said, "Is that true?" Her composure cracked for less than a second, and then she smoothed it over and said, "I was trying to find middle ground. I was trying to help." Siobhan stepped forward and said, "You told me my brother already agreed. That was a lie." Donna said, "I said he seemed open to it. You are twisting my words." She was backing up an inch at a time, moving from "he already agreed to" "he seemed open," hoping the softer version would land close enough that we would let it go. Nobody let anything go. My dad stood near the hallway looking at the floor, and I could see him putting it together. The crying, the soft pressure, the line about one of his kids being ready to compromise. Everything he had been feeling guilty about for weeks had been built out of things she made up. Then he looked up and said something none of us saw coming. He said, "I already started the paperwork. 3 ways. The way my brother wanted." Siobhan put her hand over her mouth. None of us knew. While Donna was working on him at night, he had been quietly moving forward on his own. Donna's face went white, not red, white, like somebody had pulled a plug. She said, almost in a whisper, "You did what?" He did not repeat it. She had heard him. Then she stood up and said, with no heat in her voice at all, "We are going to talk about this later, you and me, alone." She said alone like it was a location, and it was. Alone was the only place she had ever won. In the car, Malachi said, "She is going to go nuclear." He was right. I called Renee the next day and asked her to meet me for coffee. She said yes so fast that I knew she had been expecting to hear from somebody. I told her everything. The separate calls, the crying at night, the Saturday visit, the paperwork. She listened all the way through with her jaw tight. When I finished, she said, "I love my mom, but she is wrong. She has been wrong this whole time." Then she told me something I had not known. Donna had called her the same day as the confrontation, crying hard enough that it was difficult to understand her, and said, "Your stepfather is cutting you out of everything. He never loved any of you." Renee said she told her mother that was not true, that Paxton was not their uncle and had never met them, and that the money was never theirs. Donna hung up on her mid-sentence. Renee looked at her cup and said, "That was weeks ago. She still has not called me back." I asked her the thing I had come to ask. I said, "Would you be willing to say all of that to my dad? Just let him hear it from you." She looked out the window a long time and said, "If I do that, my mom will never forgive me." She was not being dramatic. She said it the way you read a weather report. I told her I would not pressure her, but that my dad was being eaten alive by guilt her mother had put inside him, and that hers was the only voice he had not heard. She said she needed time to think. 3 days later, my dad called, and he sounded shaken. He said, "Donna gave me an ultimatum. If I do not tear up the paperwork by the end of the month, she is filing. She says she already talked to a lawyer." That last part was new. Before, it was noise. Saying she had seen an attorney made it sound like a step had actually been taken, and I could hear that he was not sure he had another refusal in him. I said, "Do not tear up anything. Give me 1 week." He breathed out and said, "1 week." I called Renee and did not ease into it. I said, "I know you needed time. We do not have any." I told her about the ultimatum. The line went quiet, and then she said, "I will do it." We planned it over 2 days. Renee, Malachi, Siobhan, and I would go out Sunday morning, not to ambush anybody, but so my dad could see with his own eyes that every one of the 6 kids, including Donna's oldest, agreed. Renee also called Paxton's attorney and asked for a copy of the signed letter he had left on file, and she brought it with her in a plain folder. Sunday we drove out together, and I kept glancing at Renee, trying to see if she was reconsidering, but she just watched the window with her hands folded in her lap. I knocked. My dad opened the door and looked at me, then Malachi, then Siobhan, nodding a little like he had expected us. Then his eyes moved one more person over and stopped. His eyes went shiny, not crying, just that shine your body does before your brain catches up. He stepped back and held the door. Donna came around the corner from the hallway and saw us, and her eyes went past me, past Malachi, past Siobhan, and landed on her daughter. Her face froze. Not the recovery kind of freeze from the last visit. She put a hand on the wall and said, thin and strange, "Renee, what are you doing here with them?" Renee walked in steady, stopped a few feet from her mother and said, "Mom, I love you, but you are wrong about this, and you have been wrong the whole time." Donna's mouth opened and nothing came out. Renee kept going. She said, "Paxton was not my uncle. He never met me. He left that money for his nieces and his nephew, and I would never expect a share of it. Neither would Bryanson or Georgia." Hearing her own daughter say the names of the children she claimed to be fighting for, and say that none of them wanted the money, landed on Donna like weight she was not braced for. She turned to my dad and said, "You see what they have done? They turned my own daughter against me." Renee said, before he could answer, "Nobody turned me. I told you the same thing a year ago, and you hung up on me." Then she set the folder on the table, opened it, and put the letter face up where everybody could read it. Paxton's handwriting, his signature, the date, 3 names. Donna looked down at it and did not touch it. Her voice got louder. Not yelling yet, just louder. The way people get when the walls come in and they think volume will push them back. She said, "After everything I have given to this family, after 17 years, this is what I get?" She looked around the room for somebody to agree with her. Nobody did. Then my dad spoke, and he did it so quietly that everybody went still to hear him. He said, "You get the house, you get the car, you get the accounts, you get over $500,000. That was always going to be yours. But my brother's money goes where my brother wanted it to go." He said it like a door closing, not a slam, just the click. Donna stared at him, and I watched her sort through her tools looking for the one that would still work. She found the only one she had left. She said, "Then I am calling my lawyer tomorrow. This marriage is over." The room went so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. That was the card. She had played it for over a year, and it had never once failed. She said it with her eyes locked on him, waiting for his shoulders to drop. They did not move. He took a real breath, deep and slow, and he said, "If that is what you decide, I will not stop you. But in a divorce, you walk away with a lot less than what you already have. So think about what you are actually choosing." Then his voice got softer and he said, "And Donna, I love you. I have loved you for 17 years, but I am not going to betray my dead brother because you are afraid of a number." She did not move. She did not speak. She stood in the middle of that living room like somebody had pressed pause on her. I watched the moment she understood it was not going to work this time, and it was not one big thing. It was air leaking out slowly. Her shoulders came down from her ears. Her chin dropped. Her hands loosened at her sides. She looked at Renee, and Renee looked right back and did not soften her face to make it easier. She looked at Malachi, who had not moved since we walked in. She looked at me and I held it without blinking. Then slowly, like something heavy settling, she walked to the couch and sat down and folded her hands in her lap and looked at the carpet between her feet. She said very quietly, "I am not filing anything." My dad nodded once. He did not gloat. He walked down the hall and came back with the other folder, the real one, already organized, and set it on the table beside Paxton's letter. He said, "This is what my brother wanted, and this is what is going to happen." He was standing up straight for the first time in over a year, shoulders back and head up, not leaning on anything. Donna stayed on the couch, hands in her lap, looking at the 2 folders on the table.